Good evening, everyone. My name is John Matola. I'm the chair of the Board of Finance Audit Subcommittee. Today is April 29th. It is 6:06, April 29th, 2025, excuse me, and the time is 6:06. Welcome to the meeting. Item number one is a call to order, which I just did. Item number two is a discussion update with external auditor Joe Setafani regarding upcoming audit. I see Mr. Setafani is here and has joined us. And for the benefit of the public, the backup, which is online, commences on page 1 for this particular item. So, Joe, I'm going to hand it over to you to give us an update on the upcoming audit and what we can expect, and if anything has changed. And after you give your presentation, open it up to questions. So go ahead, Joe.
Okay. So we haven't really started the audit this year yet at this point. So that's something that's probably coming in the next couple of weeks. We'll start some initial requests. So I think I just gave you our preliminary communication.
We lost you, Joe. Go ahead. Okay, go ahead. I hear you now.
And then the front inquiry, which at some point I'll need that back just if you're aware of anything.
Yeah.
So the only thing that's new this year, compensated absences, that standard has been updated for this year.
Okay.
So that's going to require some additional data that we didn't get last year, different types of data. We're going to need a lot of data from HR, historical type data, as far as how people use their time and that type of thing to do the calculation. Because they changed the calculation before. We were just kind of recording what we estimated would vest, and now they changed the calculation to be what they think people will use. Even if it's in the next year's budget, they still want to. So it's going to be just a lot of data that they're going to have to pull together, 3 to 5 year histories. What does it look like? And so we will give. I took a quick look at what you gave us last year, and so we will kind of map that a little bit more clear as far as some of the data we need. But we'll do that sometime in our planning, so in May. But that's going to be the biggest thing, both town side and education side. So we will give you as much information as we can, but just really start that process. Calculate, provide this data to be able to calculate it. We certainly can help at some point, but all the heavy lifting really should be by HR to provide the data.
Okay. Lori, do you have any questions?
Joe, can you just remind us what is changed in the new standard and what impact that will have on the financial statements?
It's just the calculation. They're just trying to standardize that, but the biggest change is recording what people expect to use. So if you have a 15 June 30, if we expect you to use it, we need to record liability.
Joe, it's hard to hear you. I don't know what's wrong.
I think you're going in and out. Get a little closer to your mic. Maybe something's wrong with it.
A brand new microphone, like the WebEx never works for me. Zoom would have been better, like where I was before. But WebEx, every single time I bought this brand new microphone, and this is the best I got. It's literally right in front of my face.
All right. Well, do your best. So
say, is what we record the amount that's expected to be paid out to employees versus used as vacation for employees?
Well, that's the old rule, but GASB thinks that's valuable information to estimate what will be used in addition to what might be paid out at retirement. So it changed the calculation. So we expect an increase in that liability because of the calculation changes. So what they're recommending, and there's a couple GFOA tools, and I can provide all this information that shows how you kind of grab samples and get some historical data and try to figure out how each union, I mean, it's got to be done by union, so it's kind of a little bit more complicated because like police and fire use it differently. They probably end at 0 versus other unions maybe don't. So it's just going to be a little bit of a project to pull this together.
So this is going to apply. So if for any vacation time that's not used by the end of the year, that can be carried over, we'd have to do some kind of calculation to record a liability for the total carryover amount, whether it's going to be paid or taken in days off, it sounds like. Now we can't hear anything.
Yeah, try again, Joe. Try answering that question again.
Any absence that you're gonna take into account, not just vacation. That's the easy number.
Any absence where we have to pay, like sick days too, and things like that?
Everything. If someone has comp time, personal time, whatever you give people time off for is going to count if it's expected to be used. More likely than not, that's the best guidance they give, is more likely than not that it will be used. Which is why you need some data and do some calculations to figure out how likely it is.
So the first step would be, and I don't know if we have this all in one place, would be to summarize what the policy is for all the different employee groups, right? And then presumably you'd have to look at the history of how people end up taking that time or using that time versus it lapsing. Like I imagine there's some amount of sick time that doesn't get used and it just lapses, right? So that you wouldn't record a liability for, but anything that is carried over and that would ultimately be used.
Yeah, used or paid.
Okay.
How it's used or paid.
So it's a liability for something in the future though, right?
Well, you've earned it though. I guess.
Right. You earned it, but a liability for us from the town standpoint, it's something we're gonna have to pay out at some point.
Well, yeah, one way or another. I mean, some of it at retirement, but it's in next year's budget where you're going to pay for sick and vacation time.
Okay.
That's the part that doesn't make sense to me either. Like, why is that valuable information? But I don't get to make the rules. So it's just, I mean, because that liability is just up top in those top statements for all your long-term liabilities versus it's not in the back, where your budget is. So in theory, this goes back to GASB 16. This is a reissue, so that they should have made it simpler, not more complex. I mean, the thought process is to standardize how it's applied in practice, but I'm not sure this is going to get there.
Okay.
How do we account in our budget, Laura? You'll know this again. How do we account for? Is it just in payroll? Like we account for paying out for this upcoming fiscal year unused vacation time for our employees, and we know we're going to pay it out next year. I'm cashing in 2 weeks of vacation I never used. What is that?
Budget for vacation. We budget for sick
Okay.
time.
All
I
right.
don't think so.
We don't budget for sick time?
No.
No.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. We budget for overtime
Right.
that comes
Yes.
because people have to cover for people out on sick time. Okay.
Yeah, for police and fire, yeah.
Yeah.
But for no one else.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So that's the big change in the accounting standards.
Hey, Joe, you need these documents just completed by us, and we'll get it back to you, right? So sooner rather than later.
Okay.
Yes, I
No.
believe it's due to the state, but Joe, tell me if I'm wrong, by the end of May? I think I see his head shaking. I can't hear you though.
What's due to the state?
Our auditor appointment.
I think it's June, isn't it?
I don't know.
We have to vote on. We vote on it anyway at the board meeting.
I'll go back to past agendas, but I usually, I think the Board of Finance usually votes on it in June. But I'll
I know,
double
I
check.
think technically it's due May 31st, but June's fine, I guess. I don't think it's any.
Okay, if that's the case, we'll put it on our May agenda, but if I don't remember us normally doing this at the meeting where we set the mill
Right.
rate. Normally it's done in the June meeting, but I'll double check.
Yeah, no, it is. It's just, I think we're always late, that's all.
Oh, okay.
Right. Okay,
Okay.
anything else, Lori? Anybody else?
Is there anything that's changed in terms of the risk areas of the audit? Don't hear you. All right, I think we're gonna have to do these meetings in person next time. This is not,
Or use Zoom?
it's not working.
Joe, can you call in using your cell phone and using the landline or like the phone also? I don't know if it's gonna take too long, but there is a phone number I believe you can call, and then you can use your cell phone for your audio portion. It's
I
that
can read
510.
him. Oh, okay. I was going to read it to him if that would help.
Joe, do you want us to read it to you?
We can't hear you, Joe.
Joe, it's 510-338-9438. Then there's an access code or a meeting number. You want the number, Joe? Just shake your head. Can someone unmute user 2? I think user 2 is Joe.
I only see user 1.
I see user 2. Connie, can you unmute that?
Right, I actually,
Okay, no, you can't unmute, but if you click the
No.
mute button next to call in user 2, it'll tell him how to unmute himself.
Oh.
yeah.
Hey, Tom,
Hey, Joe. Joe.
we're
How are
just
you?
having a little trouble with Joe.
Yep.
Okay.
Joe, try typing *6 on your phone.
Okay, now?
Yeah, we hear you. Good.
And now turn off your computer speakers so you don't get echoing and feedback.
Turn it down.
All right, so I can just get out of this video.
No, you stay in the video. Just
You can stay in the video. Just turn your sound down on your computer.
Or mute. Or mute.
push the mute button on your computer.
I
WebEx.
did that now.
Yeah, it's still echoing.
You're not muted on your Connie, can you mute Joe on the WebEx?
Yeah. Oops.
Okay. All right, Joe.
Okay,
Perfect.
Now
What
you
was
can
your
hear
question,
clear?
Lori?
Okay, I have two questions, Joe, but one is, can you just talk to us about what you've identified as the risk areas on the audit, and has anything changed since last year?
Yeah, I don't have any of that we haven't done any work at all for 25. So I haven't read the minutes, do the planning, do risk assessment. We haven't done any of that work. So I don't have any input on that. Normally this meeting is a little bit later where we had a chance to get out and start the audit, but we haven't started it yet. So I don't expect anything, but I didn't do all the planning yet to know what might be different and what we might focus on or that type of thing. But so I don't have an answer other than I don't expect anything, but I didn't do all the audit work that would generate our expectations either.
Okay, and I just have one other question. Maybe you can get back to us on that at some point, but just one follow-up that I committed to based on a resident that wrote in. So I just wanted to ask this question. Can you just talk to us about what you've normally done in the past for tax revenue? And the question specifically is, do you do a reconciliation of the tax collector's revenue to Munis and to the bank accounts as part of the audit?
So we do a
Do you review the
reconciliation.
town's reconciliation, I guess, is more the appropriate question.
We do reconcile, we'll say, the QDS system to the town, to the Munis system. We're not looking at bank account, you're not reconciling cash. I mean, we're looking at cash at June 30, but there's nothing that's done all on the air. We get that tax collector's report that it's reproduced in the audit. And what we do is we reconcile that to the general ledger. So the components of that are revenue, overpayments, the ending receivable balances. So there is a reconciliation process, but it's not what ran through the bank. It's what ran through the QDS separate subsidiary ledger and what the Munis general ledger has. That's the reconciliation.
Okay, but separately, then you also obviously review the bank reconciliations to Munis, right?
Right. So we at June 30, everything, all that part is wrapped up there. And then there's other testing around that, a big reasonability test that makes sure that things make sense and relative to the general ledger compared to what, again, ran through the subsidiary ledger, the tax system. So.
Okay. And can you just also confirm if you ever had any reconciliation issues or any unexplained differences in that process?
No, not that I'm aware of. I mean, the reasonability is reasonability. It doesn't come out perfectly. It depends on what happens in the general ledger, but nothing that was ever significant where it basically wasn't a reasonability test, but it didn't meet that.
Okay. All right. We can follow up on that with Connie then. Thank you. I don't
Sure.
have any other questions.
All right, Joe. Thanks for coming. Sorry about the technical glitches. And I'll get these documents to you in the next week, okay?
Okay, great.
All right. Thanks, Joe.
All right.
All right.
Sure.
Let's move on to item number 3, discussion update with internal auditor Connie Saxel regarding audits and plan for the upcoming fiscal year. Connie is here. Nice to see you again, Connie. And we also just want to point out Tom Harris, our CFO, has also joined us at this meeting. So, Connie, I think there's like 6 of them, if I remember correctly.
No, John, there's 3 final audit reports
Right,
that
that's
I'll
right.
discuss tonight. And I'll start discussing them. The first is an audit of the Board of Education payroll. And this audit was performed upon the request of the Audit Subcommittee, who had recommended that I incorporate the Board of Education into our annual audit plan. And payroll, specifically salaries, is one of the largest expenditures for the Board of Education each fiscal year. And for fiscal year 2024, the proposed budgeted personnel expenditures were 135.7 million approximately, which is 61.2% of the total Board of Education budget. So what I did was I selected a biweekly payroll of September 6th and selected a sample of 50 employees from this payroll for audit examination. And the purpose was to make sure that the employee payroll was accurate in respect to timesheets or other employment contractual agreements, to ensure that the payroll payments were made to the correct and proper employees, and that all payments were made to active employees, and that all terminated employees were properly coded as inactive in Munis. I reviewed the internal controls in place at the Board of Education governing the human resources and payroll departments. It was noted through audit examinations that the Board of Education has proper preventative controls in place, such as proper segregation of duties, established detective controls, such as various supervisory reviews and approvals. And overall, the internal controls reviewed were deemed to be effective at mitigating risks associated with payroll errors or other activities, which could result in monetary losses to the town and Board of Education. I did find 2 areas of low risk, which were included in the report. It was noted that the current payroll processing and procedure manual needs to be updated to reflect Munis upgrades that have occurred since it was last prepared. I recommended, obviously, that they update this document. It was also noted that a duplication of work efforts existed in the custodial weekly timesheet process. Custodians were manually preparing timesheets, which were reviewed and approved by supervisors, and then the custodians prepared electronic timesheets, which were also reviewed and approved by supervisors. And I recommended that they eliminate the manual process and simply the electronic process to streamline operations. I wanted to state that this was a first Board of Education audit, and the staff at the Board of Education was very professional, knowledgeable, accommodating to my audit inquiries and requests, and this greatly facilitated the audit process. Do you have any questions on that?
Yeah, I have just 2 quick questions, if that's okay. So first, with the updating the manual, did you
Yes.
get and I did read the reports, but I didn't print them, so to avoid toggling on my screen, I don't remember the response. Did they give a time frame on updating the manual?
It was my impression that they were working on it within the last few weeks, but I can follow up. Usually what I do is follow back with them to make sure that these things are being done, but it was my understanding that they were working on it, as well as the duplication of efforts with the custodial timesheets. But I found that they had very sound practices.
The reason I asked that is I know that we've had a number of issues in unrelated areas with policies and procedures not being written down. And then when we have turnover of employees, that becomes an issue. And I think at the Board of Ed, they've been lucky enough to have a fair amount of longevity with personnel. But if something were to change, it'd be good to make sure that that's timely. The only other question I had in their response, I saw a notation from Courtney that they were going to be moving to an electronic timesheet process. Do you know what that involves? And is that, because they're, are they doing that through Munis, or what is that?
They do have a software program that is outside of Munis that is a timesheet process, but I'm not quite sure how that correlates with our Munis payroll system. I know because they have the certified staff, they have non-professional staff and custodians and so on, but I can double check, with Courtney regarding the electronic timesheets.
Okay, yeah, I'm just, because obviously we are moving toward doing time and attendance through Paycom, and it sounds like they're going down a different path. So it'd be interesting to understand what they're doing and if they've purchased something to assist with that. So you can get back
Right,
to us.
and
But
I agree. I did recommend that Human Resources contact the Board of Education Payroll Department because they can be of use to them, answering questions, facilitating maybe some of the transitioning from Munis to Paycom. They do a lot of, like you said, they have time and attendance already in place. I believe that they use through Munis, which I believe that's something that we would be doing as well, but with Paycom.
Do you know, Connie, whether maybe, and I'm not being critical of anyone, maybe this audit should have been done maybe a year or so ago or 2 years ago, because it seems like they're able to effectively use Munis for all their payroll needs, while we seem to have some difficulty on the town side doing that. I mean, it's kind of a loaded statement and question, but what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I believe we had high turnover in our human resources department, whereas at Board of Education, they've had longevity there. And these ladies who are processing the payrolls have been there many years, and they're well versed in the processing of the payroll system. So I think, of course, when you have new employees coming in, and like Lori stated, if you don't have standard operating procedures documented, it becomes the new person comes in and it's very difficult for them to pick up where the last person left off.
They've had longevity in their payroll people over there. That's what you're
Yes,
saying.
their employees have been there for quite a few years, and they know the system inside and out. And that's one of the things that I've been focusing on when I'm doing my current audits, is making sure the departments are documenting their standard operating procedures, because this way, if an employee leaves, the next person can easily sit in their seat and hopefully do the job efficiently and effectively.
Hi, Mary. Welcome.
Hi, Mary.
Okay.
Hi,
I don't know.
can you hear me now?
yeah,
Yeah, we hear you. Mary,
Yes.
we're just on the first audit from Connie. I don't know if you had any questions on it.
I've-
Go ahead if you do.
I've been able to hear everyone. I just haven't been able to get my video working or communicate.
We see you, though.
Well,
Okay.
you're doing fine.
I don't have questions, so I'm good.
All in all, this first audit was pretty good, right, Connie?
Yes, I did interview the staff and personnel there. I looked at their record keeping systems. I looked at their contracts for employees, professional, certified staff, non-professional staff, secretarial staff. It was a wide range of different types of jobs, functions there, and seemed like they had very strong system in place. I really was at a loss for any major findings. There was nothing that I could find there that were major weaknesses or high risk areas.
good to hear.
Okay.
Did you, and you actually presented findings to the Board of Education, did you not?
Yes, I did. I met with Mr. Testani, Courtney Laborious, and various other members there of their board, and spoke to them about the audit, and they were very pleased. Mr. Testani was very happy that the town side was going over and reviewing operations and preparing reports and audit findings.
Okay, great.
Okay. Well,
All right,
why don't
let's
you
move on. Number 2.
Yeah, go ahead.
Audit inactivation of retirees and separated employees in Munis. So I conducted a review of town, Board of Education, and police and fire employees who were approved for retirement by the Employees Retirement Board and the Police and Fire Retirement Board. The audit covered all employees, 100%, who retired from the period of January 1, 2023 through November 30th, 2024. 50 employees retired during this time period. And the purpose of this audit was to ensure that all employees who were approved for retirement by the boards were inactivated in Munis and did not continue to improperly receive paychecks. Audit finding. I discovered that two employees from the town and police and fire groups were approved by the boards for retirement, but were not inactivated by Human Resources and Munis on a timely basis. And this resulted in a total payroll error of $19,703. These errors were properly corrected by Human Resources and Payroll departments after the employee had notified them of the error. Another police and fire employee was identified as improperly paid after retirement. However, this error was captured by payroll and the proper correction was made via ACH reversal with the bank. So no dollar loss there as well. I expanded the scope of the audit to look at non-retirees. 2 out of 49 employees that I looked at who were non-retirees were identified as improperly receiving paychecks after their separation or termination date. The total payroll error after ACH reversals was $6,111. Another town employee had left employment on October 14th, 2024, but was still shown as active in Munis in December 10th, 2024, almost 2 months later. Total payroll error to the town was $4,656. The employee contacted the finance department in this case to report the error and came back to the finance department to repay the town back for the money that was owed to the town. So my audit conclusion was, town and police and fire employees, there is a potential for incorrect payroll payments to be made to retired employees or other separated, terminated employees, which may go undetected, thus resulting in monetary losses to the town. The current process of inactivating and terminating employees in Munis and Paycom by Human Resources needs to be strengthened. I did not find any errors on the Board of Education payroll side. So my recommendation to Human Resources and Town Management was prompt entry of the employee termination separation date into Munis and Paycom, the town's newly outsourced payroll processing company, by a designated employee within the Human Resources Department. Terminated and separated employees should be entered into Munis by Human Resources immediately upon receipt of notification of the employee's last day of work. Also, I recommended that they implement and utilize a termination separation checklist. A sample separation checklist was created. I created it for them for their use. The checklist would simply, when an employee terminates, check off, did you inactivate them in Munis? Yes. Did they return the keys to the town vehicle? Yes. Did they return their cell phone? Yes. Did we inactivate their passwords to town systems, etc.? So that was the type of checklist that I gave them. It's attached in the report. Per Human Resources, a personnel action form is being implemented now through Paycom, whereby the supervisor will be responsible for employee separation, termination, and this will prevent overpayments from happening in the future. Let's see, it's another audit finding here. The rules and regulations of the Town of Fairfield Employees Retirement Plan and Retirement Program for the Police and Fire Retirement System requires that an application be submitted to the employer 30 days prior to the retirement date, or at least 1 month in advance to the retirement date. It was noted that the retirement board often approved the retirement after the employee received their pension checks. And my recommendation was the board should review and approve employee retirements prior to the issuance of the pension check. The purpose of this would be to ensure that the retirements comply with established rules and regulations of the pension plan, to safeguard the stability of the pension fund, to verify that the individuals meet the eligibility criteria regarding age, service, and type of pension. However, HR stated that this was not always possible, due to the timing of board meetings and the date the bank needs to be notified for the first pension check. My solution could be the board meetings could be rescheduled to the beginning of the month rather than the end of the month, or the 30-day time rule could be increased or changed. Audit finding. A review of the final paycheck of a Board of Education non-certified administrator revealed that a formal summary of benefits document for non-union, non-certified administrators does not exist. Therefore, it could not be determined during audit examinations if the number of vacation days paid to this employee prior to separation with the Board of Education was correct, as nothing in writing existed to verify the entitlement of benefits. And my recommendation, the purpose of maintaining a written summary of benefits for non-certified administrators is to formally document all benefits associated with these positions. It's recommended that the Board of Education create a formally adopted written summary of benefits document and distribute it to all non-certified administrators for their understanding and knowledge. Do you have any questions?
Any questions?
Yes. I am shocked, I have to say, by the results of this. And I don't understand. In reading the report, Connie, I don't understand what went wrong. And I don't say that to be, I'm not trying to be facetious. How do we terminate employees without terminating them in the HR system? Who's responsible for doing that? And what's the mechanism for HR knowing that an employee's been resigned or
Right.
retired? Like, how could this happen?
And
It's
right
not-
now, in discussions with Human Resources, they tell me that obviously there needs to be a process in place, and it needs to be
But what? So
streamlined.
there was no process in place?
It appears that they were relying on the department head to let them know rather than the employee, or vice versa. And once they did get notified of an employee being separated or terminated, it did not seem to be timely, or it did not happen by Human Resources on a timely basis, is my understanding. Obviously, there was a disconnection there with when the employee terminated and when the employee was entered as separated into the Munis system. Hence, the payroll kept being processed. And then these errors were discovered sometimes by the payroll clerk because she was aware that certain employees were no longer working for us and discovered it that way, or the employee notified us. So we spoke to the Human Resources Department. We have our monthly internal audit meetings with the first selectman, CFO, there's a whole group of us. And definitely Human Resources Department is going to put a process and system in place to ensure that this does not happen again. They're establishing this personnel action form to ensure that terminated and separated employees are promptly entered into the system, and this does not happen again in the future.
I mean, it's as Lori has certainly, this is pretty basic stuff that should never happen, right? I mean, people come and go, retire or leave employment, and this is not an unusual thing. So,
Right.
it is a little shocking. I agree.
Yeah, and then it creates more work on the finance end too. Once it's discovered, then you have to call the bank and try to pull the money back out of the bank accounts and that sort of thing. If too much time lapses, then you're not able to pull the money back, and then you have to contact the employee personally and have them repay it. And it's better to prevent that rather than to have to go to those measures and try to recoup it after after
I mean,
it's
it
happened.
sounds like we've, in most cases, it was, the goodwill of the employee who notified us that they were still getting paid. And I guess I'm still fuzzy on the details here. Tom, I hope that you will get your arms around this because I hope you agree it's completely unacceptable. And I don't understand, if a department head, it seems like we've been asking for information about vacancies, like there should be multiple ways of HR understanding when someone has resigned or retired. I don't know how it can be that a department head doesn't notify them. Do they not know their responsibility to notify them? Is there not, I don't know. I'm still just bewildered over the whole thing. Or if they did get notified and then someone just didn't do their job and take the employee out of the system. But I think we need a better answer than they're working on a process or that it's going to be fixed when we go to Paycom, because this is just completely unacceptable. I think anybody would agree. It's just not okay. And the answer seemed to be, well, now it's going to be fixed when we go on Paycom because it's going to be up to the department head to determine them and terminate them in Paycom. So this all goes away. Well, that doesn't seem like a foolproof process either. If part of the reason was that, if HR had been getting notified and simply didn't do their job, then that's one thing. If they were not getting notified, then why would having the department head be in charge of doing this with Paycom fix the problem? I just don't get it. And we talked about this in a previous Board of Finance meeting. Separation from employment should trigger a lot of things. We talked about cell phones, we talked about credit cards and all that stuff. So this is a pretty serious issue. And I just, and then there was this business, well, they got an email from finance, but email's not good enough because we don't look at all, or we could miss an email. Just the whole thing is very disturbing, I have to say.
Yeah.
So I don't know how the other members of the
go
committee,
ahead.
but
Yeah, a couple of things. One is I'm implementing regular meetings with HR to address items like this. With respect to the retiree, I spoke to the chair of the retirement board. He was not aware that the individual had been paid prior to it being approved by the board. And one of the things he plans to do is to put in place, if we can, we had a call with the town attorney yesterday, is to have a special committee to approve payments so that if something needs to be paid between board meetings, there's a committee that can do that. But I think the key thing is I'm going to start meeting regularly with HR to address sort of their processes and controls.
yeah, thank you. I didn't, the response to the issue of people getting paid, people getting their pension checks before their retirement was approved, I also found to be unacceptable. The response was basically, we don't agree with the audit recommendation because the meeting might not happen and we can do it later. And Tom, thank you for recognizing that. And I'm glad we'll put in a special meeting in place. But it just, when I read that, it begs the question, why even bother, approving retirements if we don't think it's important to do it before we start issuing pension checks? I mean, it's
Agreed.
just, the whole thing is crazy. So
I think the employee has to realize that there's a process in place and that you don't necessarily, and this is probably the wrong terminology, dictate when you retire. You have to recognize that when you're retiring, you have to recognize before you get your pension check that the board has to act on it, right? So it shouldn't be backwards. So that should be part of someone's calculation when they're figuring out when they want to retire. What do they meet? It's like the second Tuesday of the month. What do you know, Tom, off the top of your head?
Yeah, there have not been. I recently joined the board, and they've had one official meeting since I joined. There was one special meeting though to approve a retirement.
So
And
they
that
only
was-
meet when they have business to approve.
No, there are updates. We have updates on investments, which was the main agenda item for the meeting we had last week. And in the case of where someone retires, Ken, when he's aware of it, has called a special meeting.
So
And,
I'm sorry, this is the pension board that's doing this?
it's the joint JRIP, Joint
Oh, all right.
Retirement. Yeah.
Okay, all right, fair enough, okay. I think you probably can have a subcommittee that if they have to meet.
Yeah, Phil is going to Phil is checking on that to see if we can do that.
All right, thank you.
Any other
Anything
questions on that?
No,
Mary, you have anything?
I would like to get an update on this. I think we should take this one very seriously, and I think that we should have a resolution like yesterday on this. I don't know how many separations we have on a monthly basis, but it's very important that we have a process that's in place and that there's accountability and that, department heads know exactly what they're required to do and that there's a designated person in HR that knows what they have to do. The retirements, I think that has to be cleared up and that's, it sounds like, that's an easier thing to fix. But boy, this other one is, God, I'm sure this is not a new issue. And it's very disappointing. So it would be helpful maybe, and I don't think we can wait until the next audit committee meeting, John.
Not until September, so.
No, I think
Hey,
maybe at one of the upcoming Board of Finance meetings, we can get an update on this. It's just very important that we get this right.
when's the next meeting where Connie would present her audit findings to the entire board? When
That usually doesn't happen until January or February of each
we don't
year.
want to wait that long.
Yeah,
No,
so I think we should, just given the timing, it would be good to get a comprehensive update on this sooner than that. So maybe we can think about the
We can
June.
put it on look at the agendas coming up and maybe in June. We have one more meeting in June. Maybe we can get an update then at our regular board meeting.
Yep.
Okay.
There's one thing I wanted to add is there should even be like an entire meeting with everyone who's leaving with human resources so they can interview them to find out what their job responsibilities were to make sure someone's going to continue doing those things once they leave.
Yeah, it didn't sound from
that's where we've had breakdowns.
Yeah, Mary, it didn't sound like there was a formal exit interview process with all employees that was standard.
But there should be.
There should be, yeah, agreed.
Yes, and at that exit interview, you would use that separation checklist to make sure you covered all your bases and everything. You've gotten what you needed from the employee and have given the employee what they need.
And so we've had issues. We've discussed this, Mary, and Lori, the checklist. Give us back your phone. Those types of. Give us back all city or town property and that type of thing.
And
so,
I think we've had the problem with insurance as well, like health insurance. They haven't been timely removed. And is that part of the checklist as well?
Yes, that was included in the checklist as part of the audit report. There's a whole list of items that human resources would need to review before the employee left the town of Fairfield. And that would include insurances as well. They can go on COBRA, or if they're a retiree, they would go on, stay on the retiree, health insurance plan with the town. Or if they're seasonal, they would not have any health insurance.
Okay.
All right. Just one last comment. I noticed on the Board of Ed issue that you raised in the audit where you said you couldn't validate the vacation payout because there was no written summary of benefits provided. There was no response from management to that. Where does that response stand?
Well, I did submit several emails to Board of Education, but never received a reply back regarding that. Although Courtney Laborious did attend our monthly internal audit meeting, And I think she, at that time, she was amenable to create a benefits type of document for these employees, but I do not know as of this date whether or not that's been done.
Did this report also get presented to the Board of Education? And I don't mean management, I mean the actual Board of Education.
Yes, I submitted it to Mr. Testani himself. I did not discuss it in person with him, but he did receive it.
No, I mean the Board of Education, the actual
Yeah.
board.
Oh, no, not
Jay Peterson?
no, just Mr. Testani and Courtney Laborious.
Okay. All right, I'll follow up with Mr. Peterson. I assume that they're getting them, but this is one, I assume that they are going to, that they would be interested in seeing the response as would we on that one.
I can share those reports with Mr. Peterson. I have not, but I will. I'll send them out tomorrow.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Audit, Board of Education expenditures and compliance with the town purchasing policy. Approved by the Board of Finance, November 16th, 2023. The purpose of this audit was to ensure compliance with the town's newly adopted purchasing policy guidelines that went into effect in November of 23, to ensure that all payments made to vendors are supported by proper supporting backup documentation, payable to the correct vendor for the correct dollar amount, ensure that payments made to vendors correspond to bid awards, RFP awards, sole source documents, etc., to ensure that correct pricing is used by vendors on invoices paid. 50 invoices from 37 different vendors totaling $6.9 million were selected for audit examination from the period of July 1 through December 18, 2024. And the random audit sample selection focused on vendors who received individual check payments over $25,000. It was noted during the course of the audit that settlement agreements pertaining to special education recipients are processed by the Board of Education Accounts Payable. In fiscal year 2022, approximately $3.1 million in settlement agreements were processed by the Board of Ed. And per the Director of Purchasing, from December 23 through May 24, settlement payments for that period of time, over 6 months, were $1.3 million. Backup documentation submitted to support these payments to accounts payable is simply an email from an executive secretary authorizing payment to a designated payee for a specified dollar amount. No other formal backup documentation is submitted to accounts payable or is present in Munis accounts payable backup to support the amount paid. My recommendation, given the magnitude of the dollar amount of settlement payments made each fiscal year, it's recommended that formal supporting backup documentation other than an email exchange from a special education secretary be submitted to accounts payable to support the payment made. I had recommended a formal authorization form to be created and signed by a supervisor and the payee. Further, in our monthly internal audit meeting, town management had requested that settlement payments be paid directly to the school or other applicable institution rather than to the parent of the child. Audit finding 2, one vendor invoice examined during the audit pertained to the Burr School fire alarm renovation project, which included the furnishing and installation of the system in the amount of $63,485. The invoice referenced a bid number 2022-136. However, this bid was awarded to the vendor for a different project for a low voltage preventative maintenance, etc. And the bid also required the services to be billed by the vendor at an hourly rate. However, the invoice examined was for a different service at a lump sum rate. I had recommended that the purchasing department incorporate requests for pricing related to potential projects which may fall outside the original scope of the bid award in future bid proposals. Instances where vendors must charge for work on projects that fall outside the bid award or which do not directly agree to the specifications outlined in the bid award should be documented and maintained in the bid file, including the reason why there was a deviation and why there was a deviation from the actual bid, why it was allowed and approved by the purchasing department. Audit finding 3, a review of purchasing bid archives posted online on the Town of Fairfield website. Sometimes bid awards were not posted on the website. There was no tabulation sheet, etc. I had recommended that the Town of Fairfield purchasing bid archives contain all relevant information pertaining to each bid for the outside party and also for improved transparency purposes. Discussions with the Director of Purchasing. They tell me that the purchasing department is looking into the implementation of a Munis bid and contract management module to assist with the streamlining of all bids. And the last audit finding deals with credit cards. It was noted during the audit that the Board of Education uses credit cards. There's 27 card holders at the Board of Education. The town has 36 at that time. It was noted that one Board of Education employee had separated employment on August 30th. The last day of work, however, was July 19th. And this employee remained as an active card holder on the American Express billing statements until December, well after the employee's separation date. There were monthly charges associated with this credit card, which were approved for payment by the Board of Education reviewing supervisors, which is contrary to the town policy. However, these charges were recurring IT-related monthly subscription charges. However, they were charged to an employee who was no longer an employee of the Town of Fairfield on their credit card. On the town side, 2 employees were noted as separated on the Town of Fairfield side, still listed as active in December. One employee had separated employment in August, the other in October. However, no charges were made on these credit cards. They were promptly terminated, including the IT one, related one at Board of Education. All those credit cards were inactivated immediately during the audit. And it was also noted that the Board of Education was not included in any of the municipal credit card training sessions offered by the Town Human Resources Department from July through September of 23. Whereby at that time the credit card policy and the associated procedures had been examined and distributed, and no other training sessions have been held since. Secondly, a formal document which outlines the policies and procedures surrounding the return of town-issued property, as well as the immediate inactivation of associated privileges after the separation of employment, especially the return and inactivation of credit cards, has not been established. And that kind of is a follow-up from our last separation checklist discussion. My recommendation was obviously the credit card be redistributed to all active Board of Education employees for their knowledge and understanding. It's also posted on the town website under Human Resources. Training should also be offered to Board of Education employees as well. And all separated employees' credit cards must be immediately inactivated by the purchasing department as soon as notice of employee separation is received by the town and Board of Education. Are there any questions?
They're just a general question, then I'll open up. So for these Board of Ed audits you did, maybe I misunderstood. Were the presentations you just gave us, did you do that to the actual Board of Ed at one of their meetings, or you haven't
I
done
had
that?
one meeting where I went to the Board of Ed and gave a presentation. However, the other reports were discussed with the Chief Fiscal Officer of the Board of Education at our monthly internal audit meetings held with the First Selectman and the CFO and other, town administrative management. And also emailed to the superintendent of schools.
So Lori, I think you touched on this earlier, that it's incumbent that these last two audits where the Board of Ed there's been findings, that Connie be able to present these to the full Board of Education, and we should contact Jeff Peterson to make sure that happens. Sorry to make you go to another meeting,
No,
Connie.
that's fine. I have no problem with that.
Yeah, I mean, I would just, obviously, it's up to Mr. Peterson how he
Right.
wants to handle it, if he wants to, communicate to the board himself, or have a committee, his finance committee do it, or have it, it's really up to him. I just want to make sure that he's aware, that the board is aware of the findings, and they can, he can choose to do that in, whatever frequency and whatever manner he wants to, but just so that it's, you make sure it's going to the Board of Ed and not just to management. I think that's the important part.
One I wanted to add is that Adam Tullen met with the purchasing committee yesterday, and
Yeah.
he did say he has done some training with the Board of Ed recently, and that it went very
Okay.
well, and he wants
Good.
to expand it.
Good.
I don't know if it was specific to the purchasing policy or if he did the credit cards as well, but he is working on it.
Yes, he did. He did mention he had done some training. I believe it was with the purchasing policy, but the purchasing policy also encompasses credit cards, so it may have included that as well.
Hey, were your recommendations well received by the Board of Ed?
Yes, I
people?
believe so.
Okay.
Yes, I believe so. I think now they realize that I'm like bubble gum stuck to the bottom of your shoe. You just can't get rid of me. So, so I think at first they thought, oh, she's just coming one time and that's it. We'll never see her again. But
No.
unfortunately, I keep showing up.
Yeah, no, when I first mentioned to Jeff Peterson that we had asked you to include the Board of Ed in the scope of your work, he was very, he embraced the idea and was,
Good.
I think everyone seemed thankful. I guess I want to circle back though, Connie, to one of the first findings you discussed, because this one bothers me a little bit. It was related to the Board of Ed, but I'm sure it happens at the town and elsewhere. And it sort of gives me a very bad case of deja vu to some of the things we identified during the Phil Pile issue. And specifically where we have invoices being paid that are attached to the wrong bid or an expired bid. I just, for the life of me, do not understand how that happens. And again, I would ask Tom to make this a priority, because one of the things that's frustrating to me is I just don't understand the accountability for these types of things. So normally, in my experience, if the accounts payable department or somebody who was responsible for cutting a check did have a responsibility to ensure that the proper documentation was there. All the supporting documentation before we paid someone, that everything to validate that payment was correct. And traditionally that hasn't been done at the town. I think, delegated that responsibility to department heads. And sometimes it's worked and sometimes it is not. But this is not the first time we've heard of this issue. And it seems like this was a valid payment. And there's nothing wrong with it. But the idea that we can be cutting checks when there's not a valid, a bid is required and there's not a valid bid attached to it, very troubling, because we know from experience that things can go wrong, and that can be a source of fraud, and it has been a source of fraud in this town.
Mhm.
And it's cost us millions of dollars at the end of the day.
Mhm.
And one of the things I struggle with is, where is that responsibility today? Is it supposed to be the purchasing department? I'm just not clear on the process, and we don't have to get into the whole thing, but Tom, I would, I mean, I know you get it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
The question is, not the question, but I think the issue is, we really have to fix this once and for all so that we have some mechanism to make sure that we have the appropriate controls around payments. And if it's not finance and accounts payable, whether it's purchasing or whoever, it cannot just simply be left to a department head, because people will make mistakes, things will go wrong, and we've seen bad things happen. So there has to be a way that we shore up our controls to make sure that someone makes sure that checks don't go out the door unless they are authorized and they have all the right, documentation
Right.
attached to them. And again, I hear this whole thing about, we're gonna get we might get an upgraded system in purchasing. I know that this is a priority of Bill Gerber's. He talked about it a year ago. Could be years before that's implemented. So there has to be some kind of workaround to that, to ensure that we, don't have taxpayer money flying out the door
Right, right.
without being authorized properly.
No, agreed.
All right, so I would maybe add that to the list of high priority items that maybe we could get an update on in June. I'd really like to understand that, because I'm not sure if it should be purchasing's responsibility, or, there could be a lot of different ways to do
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
but somehow there has to be accountability for that. So.
Okay.
Anything else?
No, I think that wraps it up. I can discuss the audit plan if you'd like.
Yeah, what's going forward?
Quickly. So I presented an audit plan for calendar 2025, and on this page 4, now you probably don't have it in front of you, but I'll reiterate. It basically gives the plan for the calendar year. I have it broken out into audit reports that are final and issued, which were the 3 that we discussed tonight. There are currently 4 completed audits. Draft reports have been written. They're currently in management review, and we've been discussing them at our monthly internal audit meetings. Actually, one of them today we discussed, and I just stamped it final. So just actually this afternoon, right before the meeting, it was not distributed as backup. So we'll talk about that at the next audit subcommittee meeting. There's audits in progress. I had started Community and Economic Development, CDBG program. I do have Parking Authority on the list as an audit to be done, and which is in progress. I just finished, back to the finished completed ones. I looked at Conservation Department, pink vouchers for Mary Leclerc. She always asks me about pink vouchers. And also town revenue and collections and disbursements, and overall general overview of those. Also proposed upcoming audits, an examination and evaluation of the IT department operations and controls governing townwide system security. Tracking, also Tom Harris asked me to track expenses associated with capital projects, just the manner how we're going to be doing that, tracking and allocating town expenses associated with specific projects. Auditing the school zone camera ticket revenue. And we need to document internal controls governing our new Paycom system. We need to understand it and know that we have sound controls in place. I would like to look at Board of Education credit card purchases. That's on the list as well, to see what the other cardholders are actually buying on their credit cards. And then I have 2 that are on the back burner in the event that any of these other audits cannot be performed for any reason. I wanted to look at human and social services humanitarian relief program expenditures. And one that I haven't been to for a while is the Main and Branch Library. Look at their revenue collections and internal controls. So we have quite a bit on the list.
Yeah.
So that'll definitely keep me busy.
Connie, can I ask a question?
Of
So
course.
something you mentioned along the way was like the person had left and there were charges to their regular monthly charges to their credit card.
Yes.
Do we have a process for that when you have a subscription or something that's billed? Is it billed to like one specific credit card for the whole Board of Ed and for the whole town or a whole
Yeah.
department? Or is there, so we can track those type of things?
Well,
And
apparently, this usually these subscriptions are unique to the department. This one was specifically unique to the IT department. And for some reason, they did not cancel this subscription or transfer it to another card holder. I don't know why, even though the employee, had given reasonable notice. They had time to do that, to activate a different credit card and transfer things over. But they did not do that, but yet they kept using that credit card. I almost have a gut feeling that if I hadn't said something, it would have continued on into perpetuity. And I know if it was me, I wouldn't want my name associated with a credit card if I wasn't employed at a certain business and they were still using my name and charging things under my name. However, when an employee terminates or separates employment with the town of Fairfield, the procedure is to immediately inactivate that person's credit card. So
okay,
that number doesn't get into anybody else's hands and people don't start charging things.
yeah, so that's not really my question. I guess maybe you said we don't have that much of it, and maybe that's the answer.
Yeah, and
I
there's
was
not that
thinking that
many,
there was
right.
subscription type of things, services for books or software or things that,
Maybe on the library side, there might be. Yeah, I'd have to really look and see what types of departments have subscriptions. I'm not sure,
okay.
but it's possible that's what they are using them for because it's a convenient way, and some vendors want to be paid like that.
Right. So I was just thinking that it was designated to one particular credit card, then that
No,
one
it
place
would
could
be
be,
spread throughout depending on who was in that department. If it was library, it would be a credit card holder at the library
okay.
and so on.
So that makes it more difficult to track to make sure
Yes,
we want the service and
right.
that it's still being used or whatever. That
Right.
that
And
was
that
my
was
concern, is that
right. And that was
things
why the
just kind of
Board of Ed
accumulate.
continued to use that person's credit card because they didn't want to stop the subscription. They needed it. However, they could have certainly transferred it to someone else's credit card within the 5 months or so that the person was no longer employed there.
Yeah.
Connie,
And that's what they
does this imply that the Board of Ed might have a similar challenge with their exit process as the town does? I don't know if they have a checklist, but if someone's
they do
handing in,
use.
yeah, if
Yeah,
someone's, if someone's handing in their technology and their credit card, if they were doing that, then that card would have been canceled presumably, which would
Yes.
have triggered, a cancellation or a pause
Right.
on the subscription that someone would have had to follow up on. So
Right.
that's
According
maybe,
to the
yeah,
Right. According to the CFO, she's had authorized its continuance in
okay,
this particular situation, even though it was not in compliance with town policy, but it's been corrected since.
got it, okay.
But it's my understanding they do use a separation checklist on
Okay.
their end.
Got it. Okay, that's good to know. So I just have one thought on the audit plan.
Mhm.
And this might be for later on in the year, but one of the substantive, one of the audits you did that had a lot of substantive findings and was sort of set to the side was the vehicle audit that was done some months ago.
Yes.
And we knew that this was we had a lot of thorny issues associated with that. And part of the problem was that we didn't have a risk manager, and there were a whole variety of issues. And now we've budgeted for a full-time risk manager. So obviously we, want to give the management some time to get a person in place. But I would like to see on the audit plan, I don't know how the other committee members feel, but I'd like to see a follow-up on that audit done. I think that needs to be something that someone gets their arms around sooner rather than later. And
Right.
I don't know if we need to wait for a risk manager to be on board, but certainly once we have one on board, there shouldn't be any further delay in attacking that issue. So maybe by this fall, sometime you can revisit that vehicle audit, or, when this person comes on board, it should be presented to them, and they should understand what all these various issues are, so that we can get an update on that, and maybe you can revisit that later in the year.
Yes, as a matter of fact, at our monthly internal audit meetings, today I presented the first selectman and the CFO and the others with the audit recommendations that had not been resolved yet. And one of them was the town vehicle audit, and they're aware of it. We spoke about it and how are we going to address it, and who is going to handle the findings and recommendations made within that report. And there are a few other audits that had some open items that we talked about. The other thing was the certificates of insurance, if you recall that audit.
Oh, yeah.
So that kind of goes hand in hand with the vehicles. That was the risk manager function at one time. So yeah, the first selectman is aware of it, and now we're just trying to determine, duties, who's going to take these duties over and handle all these tasks.
Okay, well, I'm very happy to hear that these meetings are still occurring on a regular basis.
Yes.
They're very important. And I mean, the internal audit meetings with you and the management
Yes.
team now, especially now that Tom's on board.
Yeah. Yeah, Tom's been great to work with, and very proactive, very knowledgeable in audit aspects, and it's refreshing to have someone like that to work with. And yeah, it's really been great so far.
Great.
And I'm
So far, yeah.
assuming it will be continuing into the future. But it's been really nice working with Tom, so I'm happy to have somebody with audit and accounting and finance background.
Okay, that's great. All right, well, I will plan to get these couple of items on the agenda, Connie, if you're available, maybe for the June meeting. But the
Sure.
the recommendation, it's again, Board of Ed, it was a Board of Ed finding, but I know that this is not a Board of Ed issue. I think that this has always been a townwide issue, but the issue of the payment on the wrong bid or whatever, that one, and then the policy around separated employees.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. You guys good? All right. The only other item we have is number 4, to hear, consider, and act upon a 2025 meeting schedule. Believe it or not, we didn't really vote on one. We have September 16th, November 18th at 6 p.m. Those are 2 evenings. Then we have a Board of Finance meeting. So I'll make a motion to approve those dates so we can have regular meetings on September 16th and November 18th.
I'll second that. John, we didn't set a schedule at our organizational meeting?
No, I
Okay,
didn't. Because we didn't know who was going to technically be on our committee at that time.
Okay.
I don't think the new, I think we were still trying to figure out with the new board members who was going to be on what, so we didn't do it.
got it.
So
Okay.
it's fine. So I make the motion, and you second it. So all in favor?
Okay. So 6 o'clock on the Board of Finance nights?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. All right. Anything else? All right. I entertain a motion to adjourn. I'll make a motion, seconded by Ms. Charlton, all in favor, aye. Thank you,
Aye.
everybody. Appreciate
Okay,
it.
good night.
Thank you. Good to see you all. Take care now.
Okay, good night.
Bye.